And I think we were all at a loss for what was happening and what were we supposed to do. So I think all of those emotions come up with this day.
Yeah.
But our response since then is, I think, unsatisfying in the sense that whatever you thought of the wars, I mean, whether you supported them or opposed them, they're not finished, and we didn't capture bin Laden, and there's more work undone than done, with all due respect to our military. So, 9 years after Pearl Harbor, that enemy was defeated. We were governing it and running their country. They were prostrated before us. 9 years after 9/11, very unresolved. And so a guy like this comes along, and, maybe people would normally think he was a kook, but maybe they're thinking, well, he's doing something. We're making some statement.
Well, and maybe it partly goes back to the root of how we decided to address it at that time, which was this is a war on terror, a very broad, nebulous enemy that was then very easy for some people to conflate, and they still do, with an entire religion and culture. And so that creates the space in which you can still have this sort of craziness 9 years later. The other thing I'll say real quick, too, I think it's also a good time for us, every time this year to reevaluate the changes we made to our approach to civil liberties and our belief in civil liberties and see where are we,
Changes? What? I'm just kidding.
Right, exactly. So, and it's easy to forget, right? It's easy to forget that the way we think about wiretapping now and the way we think about our privacy online is completely different than it was a decade ago. So that's also something that we need to revisit.
Yeah. Well, and it's uncomfortable for people, too, because I think for a lot of conservatives, they completely fell asleep at the switch. They're supposed to be the political faction most suspicious of government, yet they went headlong into this Patriot Act thing, and a lot of liberals were so reflexively anti-military that they failed, and to this day cannot admit that, the surge worked, and some of what we've done has been very effective. So I think, in a way, everybody is still trying to make sense of what happened vis-a-vis their political ideology. And I realized a few years ago that whatever you were on 9/11, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, you kind of had to start from, square one. You had to come up with a whole new way of thinking about this that didn't have all your prior, prejudices built into it, I think.
Right. It's interesting, too. I mean, the administration just won a court ruling this week that basically is not in favor of more openness. They were able to shut down a lawsuit based on extraordinary rendition, which I think is a very questionable practice, and, saying that it's a state secrets issue. Now, it's far from done. It'll probably go to the Supreme Court, but it has been disillusioning for me to watch this administration carry forward policies that it criticized both overtly and implicitly when it was campaigning.
Hardly any distinction, in fact, in the use of these new laws or the pursuit of these cases from the Obama to the Bush administrations. More Gang of Four for a Friday morning. It's 10:44 on KTSA. KTSA News Time is 10:50. Jack Riccardi 10 to 1 on KTSA and online at KTSA.com. On our Gang of Four today, it's Trish, DeBerry-Mejia, Elaine, Wolff, and Kevin Joyce. And we've been talking about the 9/11 anniversary is tomorrow, but the run-up to this year's anniversary has been, without a doubt, the weirdest and strangest of all of them.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
And we don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what will happen tomorrow. One thing that I find that really stands out for me in this story, though, is that the media is getting the blame for giving this guy too much attention. But I know from my purposes, he came to my attention because General Petraeus was commenting. I'd not heard of the story before that, and so I don't know if there really is a single place where the blame goes, but there is a fine line. Do you really ignore something because it? And I'm looking at you, Elaine, because you're the journalist in the room. I mean, do we ignore things because we think we're making the world a better place if we don't cover them, or in the case of a talk show host, talk about them? Is that the way to go?
Well, and maybe this isn't totally fair because I haven't read every single story that covered the original Petraeus concern, but it's okay to question him and say, all right, we know he's a really smart commander, but maybe but he's not a PR guy, and maybe he kind of boofed on this. Is it really a concern? And I think
it's not like a general has ever given an interview that, Anyway.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So maybe the approach could have been initially, is it really, as opposed to, oh my God, what's going on with this guy, and then immediately shining all the floodlights down there.
Yeah. What about, I mean, you said, for example, if you were sending out reporters, if that was your job right now, on a national basis, you would send a reporter to Gainesville as opposed to the Fox News channel saying, in the interests of being above all this, we're not going to cover it. And you would do it on the contingency of what if something, what if there's
Yes, I would definitely
a
send
massive
somebody there.
There's a shootout.
Or go
shootout or
myself.
something, yeah. But I mean, when people say to me, well, you guys are the ones making this happen because you're talking about it, I find that interesting. So is the corollary then that I can actually prevent things from happening that are distasteful or unwanted by not talking about them?
How do you sleep at night?
I would
with
like
the
to not
pressure?
talk
That's the
about
question.
Obamacare then. I'd like to maybe, will that just go away if I never talk about it? I don't get that reasoning.
But it matters a lot how you talk about it. It's not so much that you maybe don't talk about it, but it's, are you looking at the underlying facts? Are you having a rational discussion? Or are you just sort of immediately trying to hype it up as much as possible based on the emotions involved? And I think that's what a lot of the media did. So I think when we talk about the media being part of the problem here, it's not that they looked at it, because you have to look at things. It's how they looked at it and then continued to go with it afterwards.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of an unavoidable, Trish, the way electronic media works nowadays. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
It's on all the
Right.
time. So in the old media, model where there's the half-hour evening news, this would have been a story on that newscast for a few days.
Well, I mean, exactly.
But now it's on every 15 minutes.
You have the 24/7 news cycle. So they have to continue to feed it. Obviously, it probably is getting some kind of reaction, so they feel like they have to update it. And then they're not just competing with each other. You're competing against people that have flip phones and cameras and YouTube,
Right.
and they feel like they have to keep up with it.
Right.
So it's the cycle is kind of more vicious than ever.
And to come back to that whole theory of making martyrs of people, when somebody cannot get the attention of the mainstream media, when it is clear they're being institutionally ignored, that again gives them sort of heroic status, right? I had to rely on the bloggers to get my story out because the networks
Right.
wouldn't talk about me, right, Kevin?
Right.
So, I mean,
right.
at every turn, this guy has a way of playing the story to his advantage, even if the media had ignored him.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, if he wanted to stop it, he could definitely stop it at any moment. I mean, he could just say, hey, we're not going to do this, and it's over. It's dead. I mean, no one's going to cover
Lock
it.
himself in the church.
Yeah, it's done. I
Right.
mean, it's over. But he just keeps feeding off of it. And you're right. It's hard to single out one single person in this whole ordeal. But
Yeah.
it's definitely changed. I mean, we talked about Pearl Harbor. We talked about September 11th. I mean, think about the differences in our culture between those two time periods. I mean, one that was very linear. Today, it's made up of divisions and very more like a wilderness. We don't know. And there's multiple paths to different destinations and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. So.
All right, we're back with more Gang of Four on a Friday morning. It's 10:55 on KTSA. Boy, Karen Klaus, I just nipped in the bud a conversation that if it had gone on the air would have gotten us in big trouble. You got to watch these all blonde Gangs
I know.
of
I'm
Four.
pointing fingers at all of
Have
them.
you noticed
They're
that?
all guilty. Yes, I did.
And how about,
see them.
does Elaine Wolff not look like Annie Lennox?
I love it. That is
Yeah?
a very great cut. I love it.
Thank
So
you.
she's
You
gonna
have to be brave.
she's
to
gonna
do
sing
something
for
like
us.
that.
She's going to sing for us later.
I'd
Hey,
rather
what
not.
about this mom that pulled a gun on her kid's opposing volleyball team?
Everybody laughed about it, and they made the movie of the week about the cheerleader mom that was, plotting to kill somebody.
Yeah.
But man, nobody knows if this is real. They're going to They're going to look at the videotapes from the parking lot.
Are they reviewing the video to determine who did it or whether it really happened?
See, that is unknown at this time. But there were a bunch of girls, and they said that it happened. But who knows?
Is volleyball that kind? I mean, I don't. How emotional do you get about volleyball, even if your own kid's playing
Ask
it?
the kids at Metzger.
I mean, really?
I know.
I mean, maybe I'm being prejudiced, but like if you told me this was high school football, I could believe anything.
I know.
Right? And you mentioned the cheerleaders. I can
cheerleaders,
I can
yes.
believe that. I don't know volleyball.
I don't know. ESPN. I think
really?
they're going to start a new station, ESPN 4.
Is that going to be the
All
all volleyball?
All
channel?
volleyball, all
Oh,
girls
man.
volleyball.
Man. and I don't know about you, but I can't watch volleyball without a beer and a gun.
Jack Riccardi, 10 to 1, 550 KTSA.